Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 40. University accidentally exposes rape accuser as liar. That was probably one of the longest delays I've seen between hitting the start button and having it actually start counting down. So I hope you guys didn't hear a long empty space and my computer wasn't lying to me. But with that, on to the article. The reason I picked this article is because when this first started, this application of the Dear Colleague letter to university policy and everything, one of the things that we talked about on Honey Badger Radio, one of the things that the movement at large talked about was how this was going to lead to a lot of lawsuits. It was going to encourage false accusers. It was going to lead to a lot of wasted time in the courts. It was going to lead to a lot of male victims of false accusations. And it's really panned out that everything we predicted has happened. And now we have, it's being regularly reported on that these universities are engaging in poor exercises, basically, of the judicial responsibilities that the United States government dumped on them. And this is one of those examples where the university, instead of having a proper investigation and dealing with 100% of the evidence and having a rational approach to that evidence, to evaluating and drawing conclusions from that evidence, what the university ended up doing was once again thinking it was their responsibility to railroad the accused. And this time they've basically, once they got into court and the accused has sued them, their mistakes are coming to light. And so here is Megan Keller for the College Fix, and get down to, there we go. Newly obtained evidence in Title IX related litigation against George Washington University suggests that the school does not understand that a rideshare vehicle does not pick you up the instant you book the ride. The key question in the private university's investigation into Jillian Chandler's allegations against John Doe and the resulting due process lawsuit filed by Doe was how intoxicated Chandler was before they returned to his room in an Uber trip, or as they returned to his room in an Uber trip. Doe submitted phone records from Chandler's friend last month that showed Chandler didn't call that friend from the Uber. This was the story that they had been telling, was that Chandler called a friend from the Uber cab. The friend had cited that invented call as evidence that Chandler was slurring her words, showing she was too drunk to consent to the sex that followed. In a filing last week, ahead of Wednesday's scheduled hearing on the summary judgment motions, Doe said the university's newly provided evidence of Chandler's own phone records reveals its spectacular misreading of those records. GWU had said that Doe lied to this court by claiming Chandler didn't make the alleged slurring phone call from the Uber. Citing Chandler's phone records that the university could have easily obtained before its Title IX hearing, Doe says those records actually show Chandler was coherent enough to make 2 calls before Uber arrived to pick them up. One was a 2-minute call with her roommate, AC, whose absence as a witness at the hearing is now more conspicuous than ever, Doe's filing says. A 3rd call from the Uber itself to AC may not have been answered based on how Verizon categorizes small calls under a minute. These are now the most damning evidence against Chandler. The school's response to Doe's claims that his appeal was wrongly rejected also revealed that GWU has been judging appeals by the wrong standard for at least 6 years, he claims. The errors of the appellate officer suggest that if court rules in Doe's favor, the judge will need to provide clear evidence on how GWU should proceed, since the university can't be counted on to follow its own rules. Where have we heard that before? A scholar of Title IX abuses, Brooklyn College professor Casey Johnson told the College Fix in an email, referred to as Jane Roe in the litigation, Chandler voluntarily outed herself in March. She publicly identified Doe by his real name as a rapist hours before he obtained her friend's phone records, according to Doe. The university treated Chandler's calls made after booking the Uber ride as if she made them from inside the Uber after it picked up her and Doe. She had called the Uber at 11:56 p.m. and they arrived at Doe's dorm at 12:21 a.m. Phone records didn't show the exact second within the minute. But her receipt shows the trip took 16 minutes and 31 seconds, meaning they left the party sometime in a 1-minute window between 12:04 a.m. and 12:05 a.m. Chandler made 2 phone calls between the Uber order and pickup at 11:57 p.m. and 12:03 a.m., first to her roommate AC and then likely to the Uber driver based on the non-fixed VoIP number she dialed. Her possibly unanswered call from inside the Uber to AC followed at 12:06 a.m. And there we go. This is where she outed, and this was, I think, on Facebook, and the image is not very clear. I don't know if this image is not very clear, so it may be difficult to read the text on the screen. But she outed herself. She said often victims are asked to reveal themselves, to come forward with their stories in the hope that someone will hear them and listen. Perpetrators, however, remain in the darkness, assuming that others' ignorance to their crimes will render them innocent. The name is blurred out. Is a rapist, and I will not let him be known solely as John Doe. GW found him responsible and suspended him in January. He refused to take responsibility and instead claimed that he is the victim of a system biased against men. He brought a lawsuit against the school as John Doe, but publicly compromised my identity in the lawsuit, which isn't true. His name is not John Doe, and he does not deserve anonymity. His hearing was fair. The issue is not the bias of the school, but that he chose to commit sexual assault. I am not doing this to promote an agenda. There is an individual found to have committed sexual assault, and he believes he can buy his way out of it. Nobody knows that he has harmed women, and nobody ever would. Now they will. Suing our school does not absolve him of what he did. Calling me a liar in a 50-page claim doesn't prove his innocence. The truth is on my side, and the truth prevails, so long as we are courageous enough to speak it. Well, it turned out that the truth was they lied about her being drunk. Considering that Chandler's friend E.E. was the only witness out of 6 to claim that Chandler was visibly drunk, Chandler's records confirm in stunning detail everything that Mr. Doe has said from the beginning and erase whatever residual doubt there might be about Chandler's alleged incapacitation and truthfulness, Doe's filing said. If Mrs. Roe had been incoherent, AC would have learned it from the first phone call at 11:57 p.m., not the second at 12:06 a.m., Doe says. The fact that she ordered the Uber and was able to make 3 separate calls that make perfect sense in the context of what was happening contradict Chandler's claim to be in a blackout state at the time. She was completely mentally coherent. The context of Chandler's communications aligns with Doe's contention that she took the initiative in their interaction and was fully conscious of her actions as she did so, he claims. She originally claimed that AC had left the party shortly after arriving, but after Doe claimed the roommates were texting each other about the availability of their room for sex, Chandler changed her story to say AC was still at the party. But if that were true, then she wouldn't have called her either. Ms. Rowe's refusal to call AC as a witness and instead rely on EE's invented phone call is a silence that gets progressively more deafening. Given that 7 to 8 minutes passed between the start of their call and Uber's arrival, if AC were still at the party during that first call, Doe finds it strange that AC didn't go searching for an incapacitated Chandler or call her back. The filing also claims it's impossible for Chandler to have passed out and fallen down the stairs, as she left Doe's dorm and then ran home, as she claims, given that she called another friend from the party, AD, on her way home. Someone with a doctorate should make better arguments. Robert Snyder, GWU's Executive Director of Planning and Outreach, told the court in a declaration that he has been evaluating whether to grant appeals based on evidence that was not available during the adjudication. This is contrary to the university's own code, which says viability is the only standard for evaluating appeals, Doe's filing says. That means they must be based on new information that is relevant to the case that was not previously presented at the hearing or conference, and that significantly alters the finding of fact, in the code's words. The court has already agreed the code's plain language requiring new evidence as opposed to newly discovered evidence leaves no room for Snyder to reject Doe's appeal, the filing says. The requisite new evidence was EE's phone records, which showed the alleged Uber call never happened. Snyder's very job description in the code requires him to use viability as the standard by which to judge appeals, and forward those that meet the threshold to the committee that reviews appeals, Doe says. Tellingly, GW offers no alternative explanation as to what Article 34's viability review is doing in the code. The filing goes on to mock Snyder, saying someone with a doctorate should not give specious reasons for rejecting appeals. Snyder had refused to concede that a toxicology report on Chandler submitted by Doe in his appeal would have significantly altered the facts of the case. That's interesting, too, because if the toxicology report showed that her level of intoxication wasn't so high, it should have changed everything. According to Doe, Snyder mischaracterized the report's finding, as Chandler would have had a high level of intoxication if she had consumed the amount of alcohol she claimed, something the hearing panel knew. The report actually concluded she could not have performed the actions or had the memory she claimed at that intoxication level. Snyder's other argument is a bit crazy, the filing said, that the hearing panel could have drawn the same conclusions from the underlying data as the report author, toxicology expert Harry Millman. It is like saying parents don't need to take their children to medical doctors for a diagnosis because they, the parents, are are aware of all of the same symptoms that would be reported to the doctor. Dr. Snyder cannot honestly believe that the panelists, 2 GW students and 1 low-level GW administrator, have anything close to an expert understanding of the physiology of alcohol intoxication. And that would be the end of it. That's the end of the article. But at the end, there's another article it links to, which we aren't going to have time to go over. GWU promises to keep using low standards of evidence for rape. So they're setting themselves up for future lawsuits, unless this lawsuit is won by the litigant, Doe there. So what we're seeing here essentially is this university is being held to account for a particularly shitty way of handling their hearings, and they're sort of resisting it, but it looks like they're not going to get out of this because these arguments are pretty solid.
But it's not real feminism.
Yeah, it's not real feminism. No, it's not. There is no such thing as real feminism.
Do you think that the university would rather take a couple of lawsuit hits rather than, update their policy?
Well, it depends.
Because this is what...
Yeah.
Because they may be relying on, not all of them will sue us, so we might as well keep the policy for ideology's sake.
Yeah, it depends on if the policy is in place just for ideology's sake. If it was in place because they feared lawsuits from women who would accuse them of not handling sexual violence allegations accurately. And they may be weighing this against, like, how many women might sue us for not railroading the guys they're accusing versus how many guys are going to successfully sue us for railroading them. And they may be looking at it as, we think this is the right thing to do, and these lawsuits are us taking our knocks for doing the right thing. And
Surely the lawsuits from the women
Yeah.
wouldn't have any grounds, because isn't this a matter for the actual justice system rather than the universities if an actual rape happened?
They shouldn't have any grounds, but there's been some things that have happened that
Yeah.
have put this is a U.S. university. So in 2011, we had the Dear Colleague letter, and the Dear Colleague letter is policy based on the way these things work in federal government. It shouldn't work that way, but it is because Congress didn't say no. And so then the education department cemented that by writing it up as policy, and the federal government didn't say no. So we have a policy, a federal policy that says federal money going to universities is dependent on them complying with a requirement by the federal government that they adjudicate these cases as if they were a justice system, that they use a lower standard of evidence than the real justice system, and that they apply penalty to the best of their ability. Yeah, the preponderance of evidence standard is what they have to.
No, I remember that Betty DeVos was.
Yeah, she was gonna.
Whatever happened, I haven't kept up with it. What happened with that? Or is it still?
It has not been significantly changed in that, it's been changed in that is no longer federal policy. They are not required to do this in order to receive that money now. But all these universities put policy into
Discord
place.
That posted pictures of they were having seminars about how the college had to deal with this stuff, even though it doesn't.
Yeah, and they're well. This is the other thing. With respect to big bureaucracy type organizations like universities, big corporations, and so on, a lot of times, federal policy gets written, and it goes this wave of ripples go through the various organizations that are impacted by that policy, and they all have a bunch of meetings, and they all change their policies, and it takes a while for everything to get implemented, and so on. And then, after that's all through, the federal policy changes again, and it takes that much time for them to fix things. The policy's been reversed because it was a bad policy. We have to go back to what we were doing before. Well, we just dismantled our entire system for doing what we were doing before so we could set this up. So we can't just reverse. And a lot of this, with these universities, the other end of it is moral arguments were made for why they absolutely have to do it this way. And those moral arguments were made for 50 years leading up to it. Yeah.
Plus, there's a stranglehold by feminism on these universities anyway, so they're going to continue doing it that way.
Right. They've got the ideology.
They reverse it. They're like, "Oh my God, you want women to be raped?"
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
They've got the ideology in their administrators. They've got it in their staff, their educational staff. They've got a large population of it among the students and everything.
There was I think it was about a year ago that someone wrote in chalk that something like sexual violence is violence against women.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God. And then it seems like, I think someone wrote something where it was like, to the effect, what about homosexuals? Where it's like, that's a good argument.
Yeah.
Gay people don't exist.
Well, I've actually had feminists argue to me that violence against homosexuals is actually misogyny because they don't like them because they're girly. And you obviously have a stereotype of gay men that in your head that doesn't apply to all gay men. Some of the most masculine, rugged, stereotypically masculine men, actually, that I have known have been as gay as you can get. Zero interest in even close friendships with women unless they're high testosterone women that they can get along with. They have no patience for girly shenanigans, and they will let you know in no uncertain terms because there is no threat to them from the girls aren't going to like you. okay, that's fine. I don't like them either. Keep them away from me, you know. And so, but yeah, I've heard that argument that, you know, oh yeah, when gay men get raped, it's really misogyny because it's actually an attack on their femininity.
They just think they're a woman. That's why it happened.
And they think that only the feminine gay men get raped. Apparently, well, I've known at least one very
Bears aren't real,
masculine.
though.
Yeah, there's not real. It's not a real rape because there's no vagina.
There's no bears. There's no otters.
Yeah, there's all kinds of
Twigs
excuses.
are
I'll
the
make
only
up for
thing that
that.
exists.
Yep. What happens if you drop a 40-pound box of rape on them? But yeah, the story itself, like, as I went through and I looked at it earlier, the significant thing about this is that the university did a really shitty job of dealing with the evidence, and it looks deliberate to me. I mean, I know they're giving them the benefit of the doubt for stupidity, and if in a court setting, that's what they should be doing. That's correct. But I kind of suspect, just based on other cases like this and the way they're arguing this and everything in court, they got caught mishandling the evidence or failing to properly take the evidence into consideration, especially with their promise to keep using a low standard, you know, and now they're trying to cover their asses.
Well, the one problem is it seems to be even getting to the teachers that are just like, they can care about their students.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping...
Even the ones that it's just like they want to care about all of them, not just the women.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm hoping that this case, with this being the situation, that the evidence was not properly evaluated and taken into consideration and everything, that this guy will win his suit. And when he does, it'll establish for universities that they cannot use as an excuse, you know, that they didn't deal with the evidence properly. That they're going to have to be better about dealing with the evidence. And what I'm hoping the universities will do is turn around and say, well, we're not qualified to do this.
Well, one of the professors in it's the Department of Engineering. He's like, if you come forward to me with, like, you've been sexually assaulted or you've been raped, I have to tell the administration.
Yeah.
And he's also like, there are certain things he brings up in a way that's just like common sense, but I don't know.
Well, and you get a mix in universities. I mean, there are going to be people that have been teaching there for years. There are going to be people that are fairly new to it. And then some of the ones that have been teaching there for years are probably looking at what some of the ideologues are doing and going, this is insane. This would never have flown in the 70s, you know. This would never have flown in the 80s. How can they be doing this now?
Because I had one professor that it's like, he would just lecture us. It's like, well, the Republicans just want to take advantage of people. And another...
You're cutting out.
There's 30% women in engineering. We need to fix this. Even though it's really...
Oh, yeah.
There's only so much interest.
Well, you do have your
Not
ideologues.
that the women aren't good at it. It's just they don't find it interesting.
Well, that's one area or one thing, and another thing is they don't want to apply themselves. They might find it interesting, but they don't want to apply themselves to the level of studying they're going to have to do in order to actually get a degree in that area.
Yeah, I've seen a few videos where it's talked about, like, you have a math class, well, like almost half of the women left.
For some reason, every time you talk, the first sentence you say comes through just fine, and then after that, it cuts out.
I'm trying to figure out if it's my connection or the server we're going through.
It might be the server we're going through, or you're going through. Is it possible that your mic is set?
I've got the same.
You've got the what?
I noticed that too.
Okay, so it's not just
to confirm that it's not your connection.
It's not me.
It seems to be doing it on everyone's end.
Okay, then in that case, it's then it's not at my end for once. But yeah, the situation is such that what I'm hoping to see is like these court cases, all these different court cases that are coming through. You're seeing, students who are suing over their evidence
Doing it
not being
again.
properly considered. You're seeing students who are suing because they were denied representation. You're seeing students who are suing because they weren't allowed to know what their accusation was. All these are due process violations. And as due process violation after due process violation gets universities into trouble, my hope is that university boards and administrators will come through to the government and say, we are not qualified to handle this. We are not capable of adjudicating it. We're not capable of ensuring that that the students receive fair treatment. We're not professionals in this area, and we don't want this responsibility. Please change the law so that we don't have to do this. We would prefer to turn sexual violence allegations over to the police and let the justice system handle it. And that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, but except that's definitely not what they're going to do, because the entire point of this operation is not to bring about justice.
Right.
I believe they would cling to their supposed competency to do
Not
this.
if it causes them too much financial pain.
It seems like there's some incentive from the administration to push this so that they can expand their department and get more money.
Well,
Yeah,
among
but
other
if you
things-
see how
tuition.
much money is now in there and how much money the bureaucrats who administer this kind of Title IX justice get, it's far more money than some departments get in total.
I like
Yeah.
one analogy I heard where it's like it's the octopus.
Okay, it stopped again.
Another-
I heard the octopus and then nothing else.
People use the analogy of like an octopus monster where it just gets everywhere. Sort of like
Gets its tentacles in the
politically incorrect, where it's like we're everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Kind of the same thing.
Well, the thing about universities is they're a massive departments. So you have the president of the university, and you have
Yeah.
a board that runs the university's main policy and everything. But for instance, the
We have
department,
to care about everyone.
right? But the department that might handle things like this is completely divorced from all of the other departments. So it's not necessarily true that all of the other departments and the main administration will want the same thing as the like say the women's studies department wants,
Yeah.
because they're not profiting from it. Just the women's studies department is profiting from it. So there's a bit of a conflict there, and there's hope in that if this becomes such a pain in the ass and so expensive for universities to continue to handle, and such a distraction from their main purpose, which is to make money educating the public, or at least seeming to educate the public and seeming to prepare them for jobs, that then they're going
Sort of like
to
roads.
yeah, they're going to end up throwing it under the bus. At some point, they're going to be like, this is not working out for us, guys. You're going to have to go do this somewhere else. Make your money exploiting the female victim narrative somewhere else. And,
Well, I'm sure you've heard about that recent case where a guy actually put in a Title IX against a girl after sex, and now she, as well as feminists, are complaining that it's sexist.
that it was never meant
So-
to be used this way. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
right.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think she's
Yeah.
actually so suing the school now. So, yeah, they're going to be getting it from both directions now.
Yeah, and
You create the two-headed snakes, and then
it's going to come back and bite you twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's going on. So, like, there's the reason this kind of news story, even though it's a news story that something egregious happened to this student and he's had to take them to court because of it, the hope that this type of lawsuit carries with it is that the system is going to correct itself, specifically because the students that are targeted with this are going to make it such a pain in the ass for these universities to be responsible, to administrate this system, that the universities may find it their best bet to get out of that. to get out of the business of adjudicating sexual misconduct allegations. And so it's probably not going to happen next week, or maybe even not next year. But I think that's what we're going to see happen. I think they're going to be like, we can't do this. This is crazy. We are here for a purpose, and this has become our purpose. It's eclipsed our purpose, and now we've got to get rid of it.
I guess
Yeah, but
Remy
then
doesn't
they are
like us.
going to
I don't
come
think
for
so
the
at all.
other end and are going for the funding agencies. And once they do that, then it will actually come from the researchers themselves, because they don't get money unless they adjudicate such things. That's the other way. They still have a lever that they can come through with. And at least the National Science Foundation has already now required that universities report sexual harassment.
Well,
them.
at some point,
Yeah, but I don't look. I think we're talking far too much about money in this instance. I mean, we all know they are willing to put the money to it.
yeah, at some
Yeah.
point,
There are quite simply too many people in too many positions willing to spend money on destroying men's existences.
right?
Well,
But
they
at
all
some
are
point,
For the university to actually go to the state and say, "You please handle this," we can't.
yeah.
I mean, if anything, they are going to cling to this because it gives them the opportunity to destroy men's
Well, they
existences,
keep talking about
regardless how
bringing
much
in
it costs.
women.
At some
So
point,
it's
though,
like,
with
you'll
all
be
these,
safe at Alcarage.
yeah, at some point with all these lawsuits, and the universities being forced to deal with the fact that their policy is, in fact, unconstitutional and illegal, and an attack on the students that go to their universities for a purpose. What will end up happening is they're not going to, these funding organizations that, you know, we'll provide scholarships to your university, but in order for your university to qualify to receive the scholarship, you have to do these things. They won't be able to enforce that. If, for instance, if the Science Foundation, the National Science Foundation, said, we'll give scholarships to your students, but in order for your students to be able to use those scholarships to pay for school at your university, you have to use forced abortion to keep any women from becoming single mothers while they're on your campus. The university would not be able to apply that policy because it's illegal. You can't force it legally. You cannot force an adult to have an abortion, and so
They would be able
You
to.
have to force people to be
No, I mean like physically forced. Pick them up, take them to the
Competent.
clinic, and yeah, you cannot force an adult to have an abortion. That you have the right. There's a
Can you
legal
not?
right to refuse medical treatment.
Yeah,
You
sure.
can
but
if they're
just
mentally disabled.
look, just because it's illegal doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah, it doesn't. It
I mean,
does.
that's the reason why
according
crime
to the.
exists.
Yeah. But you cannot put into your contract. This is a requirement of the contract. It
Or you
invalidates
can put it
the
in,
contract.
but it's not binding.
Yeah, it invalidates the contract. So, say the NSF decides they're going to put this illegal stipulation in the contract. The university can come back and say, well, you know, what you are requiring of us is illegal. Do you want to be on record like that, putting an illegal requirement to your funding? Because, you know, all of our funding and stuff has to be reported to the federal government. They would have to withdraw that. So it's all going to depend on where this ends up legally speaking. Like if the universities come along and say we want these policies removed, these requirements removed, we're going to change our policy and everything else, the Science Foundation is going to end up shit out of luck if they're going to try to enforce something that goes against the law or that they can't legally require of the universities.
Well, doesn't that depend on if the federal government has a problem with it?
It does, but or the state. Like
look,
if Ohio
this is,
made a
this
law.
is the point I want to make. This is how genocides happen. You know, this is.
Yeah, I know.
Someone institutes a policy, and then someone else argues,
rid of
"Yeah,
them."
well, this is against the law. I'm going to sue you." And then the court says, "Well, yeah, but I'm a feminist. I don't give a shit." And then you go to the federal government, and the government says, "Well, yeah, we could turn this around, but we're just not going to." You know, this is this is how it happens.
Yep, and in
We
the
could do
United
that, but
States, in
You
the
women
United
you can argue that you have
well, in the
you can
United
argue
States,
that,
the government
things
is
are
ultimately
illegal, but apparently they don't care about things being illegal anymore.
in the United States, the government is ultimately beholden to the people, and we forgot that for a long time, and we ended up with Bushes and Obamas and all that kind of stuff. But there's a rebellion and a revolution going on right now. It seems like people don't recognize it for what it is, but Trump's election was more than just a political upset. It was a giant fuck you to the establishment from the American people. And whether he's great or terrible or something in between or a little of both, a little of everything, that is a trend that appears to be continuing. The candidates in local elections that are successful now are the ones that are willing to go anti-establishment. And this is like, so with the situation of government power being what it is and being what it has been, we're looking at not necessarily a total turnover of government power, but we are looking at the ability of the public to change the attitudes of the government, and we are looking at these social justice progressive ideas. These are not as popular as the people who promote them thought they were.
Because so many people just weren't interested in politics, but politics were immensely interested in them.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is when the
happened.
bullhorns turn off, it's really just 3 people shouting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it might be
But-
more than that, but the thing is, we are able to affect change, and this is
Well,
And it's the mainstream media it's promoting it too. I mean, so obviously some people in power must be, on the side of the SJWs,
yeah.
because everywhere you hear on news, it's that agenda.
Yep. And of course,
It-
they're losing
Just
their
for the
power
record,
because
I
of it
would never
now.
have denied. Just for the record, I would never have denied that we have an ability to affect change. It's just that I think we are underestimating the willingness of public figures to involve themselves in scandals for their ideology.
Oh no, we're not underestimating it. The way I would put this, there's an old adage, and there's 2 schools of thought on it. The old adage is you can't fight City Hall, and the 2 schools
Rocco
of
fought
thought.
City Hall.
Yeah, the two schools of thought that I've seen on it. One is that's absolutely 100% correct, and the other one is that's absolutely 100% incorrect. My school of thought is City Hall is Goliath, and we are David. And you can fight City Hall, but you damn well better find its vulnerable spot.
it's
And in
basically just one person at a time.
Yeah. And it may actually be that where, the old story of David and Goliath, it was a rock to the forehead with American society versus Uncle Goliath. We may need death by 1,000 paper cuts instead.
Like Peterson.
Yeah.
It's like 3 minutes to midnight is basically, I was thinking it kind of indicates
You
Yeah,
stopped.
yeah,
It indicates. Sorry.
Where his wife's dream was sort of like, I conceptualized it as a change, as a paradigm shift, where it's
Yeah.
going to change.
And
Did he say anything about that? That he really said that to that
No,
guy, or
no.
what he meant by it, or anything?
It was just the one guy said that.
Yeah.
So he just construed that. Oh my God,
Yeah.
Peterson's into mysticism.
Yeah, I
for
saw that.
crying out loud.
Because
It's,
Allison,
The mystical
and-
lobsters, right?
Yeah.
Magic lobster ride. Well,
Wait, are they saying that crystals don't work?
well, it depends. Like if she has bills to pay and she can't get the money somewhere else, Crystal will work her ass off. But
also they'll get a lot more attention. So
Yeah.
It means they'll have a lot more on their schedule.
Did he pose for that picture, or did somebody Photoshop that lobster into his...
I'm absolutely convinced that this is a Photoshop.
Oh. Yeah.
But
Now,
there
that's
is
artwork.
there is one that is not a Photoshop. This.
Yeah.
He actually did this. And
Like,
I think
if I was
nobody
him,
has
I
an
would-
idea where and when.
If I
I
was
like,
him, I would definitely embrace the joke. But guys, it's
Yeah,
6 after
that's the
11,
best
and
way
I
to
gotta
do
get
it.
running. I gotta go to work, so I'm gonna have to end the stream.
Good night, Hannah.
So
Good night, Hannah.
I'm gonna
Thank you.
stop here. So good night, all.
Good night.
I'm gonna
Good night.
probably take off too because I gotta
Yeah.
go.